I noticed something recently that I think is a linguistic change in progress in English, and you will read and hear it everywhere. Once you notice it, there is no returning back to your life before. It's a new construction that could signal a small but meaningful grammatical shift in English. I thought about writing a paper and submitting it to a journal, but that's a lot of work and, frankly, a lot of expense in terms of both time and money. What, you thought academics got paid for journal articles? No, we pay a membership to an association and then pay a submission fee, and then we or our universities get extorted for an open access fee if we want more than 10 people to read it. Academic publishing is a scam, a double blind, peer reviewed scam. Anyway, I realized that this phenomenon is on the rise. It might be a change in progress in English, and it tells us something about how language works. And it flies completely under the radar. If you rewind this back, you'll notice that I've already used this new construction in English twice in this video already. Leave me a comment with what you think it is, and then, if you want, you can reply back afterwards and say if you were right. The thing about this shift is that it's one instance of something that happens over and over and over again in language. Words lose their meaning and their power and their emotional valence over time, and we try to just punch them up. It's a process of intensification and whatever the opposite of that is, blandification or dullification. Anyway, words lose their luster and we add a little something. In linguistics, there's different examples of this that all go by different names, but I think of it as the same phenomenon. Jespersen cycle when it happens to negation in sentences, do support when it happened to verbs in English, and even the euphemism treadmill when it happens to words with a negative meaning that we replace with something nicer, and then that nicer thing is replaced. Some of you can remember back to the 1980s and 1990s when older words that are now considered taboo were replaced with things like African American and Asian American, not what my grandmother called my friends at my wedding. Oh, and if the suspense is killing you, the thing I noticed is the addition of back to words that have the prefix re. It's not how I normally speak, but I did it 3 times already in this video. Did you notice? Let's replay it back. There is no returning back to your life before. If you rewind this back, you can reply back afterwards and say if you were right. Let's replay it back. Remember back to the 1980s and respond back to your comment and let me know if you noticed. This phenomenon is absolutely on the rise in the last 20 years, and as far as I can tell, it's obligatory for some speakers of English. But here's the fun part, only in certain contexts. In other contexts, it's not allowed. It's not what linguists call licit. So today, we're going to talk about what's even happening here, how it happens, and how it relates to broader patterns in language. So get comfy, recline back, and enjoy. This is Language Jones. All right, this is normally where sponsored content would go, but I don't take that many sponsors because I'm picky about the ones I do take. But I do want to give a shout out to Elias from Puerto Rico. Woo! Puerto Rico! Who sent me some coffee beans from Baraka Coffee Company, a local roaster in Puerto Rico. I'm holding empty bags because I drank them all. The last of it fueled writing this script, so thank you. If you want to keep me caffeinated and producing content, you can support the channel on patreon.com/languagejones or right here on YouTube with super thanks. Okay, returning back to the task at hand. So what's going on with this? Well, it's time to do a little scientific thinking. I don't see an explanation of this very often, and it's hugely important, so I'm probably going to start discussing it a little bit more on my channel. Scientific thinking, whether you're doing an empirical experiment or even just a thought experiment, is when you formulate your ideas into a testable hypothesis, and then, and this is the most important part, try to prove yourself wrong. We don't prove, we fail to disprove. That's completely different from how most people think about evidence, which is a much more lawyerly approach to cherry-picking things that make your argument look good. This difference is why some lawyers revile scientists and why we revile them back. And that's a great segue into the first thing I do, and the first thing you learn to do in syntax class. Try to break it. It's like engineering. So revile back only really makes sense if you're reviled first. You're returning the sentiment. So we have to file away that there are some rewords that don't allow for this back, like rejoice or rely. I have an idea of why this might be from my linguistics training that I'll get back to. Big hint right there. But spoiler, you have implicit knowledge about the history of English, French, and even Latin that if I asked you about, you wouldn't be able to describe. But when I ask you what words feel right together, it preserves a few thousand years of etymological differences in linguistic history. I'll get back to that at the end. Okay, second in the science thing, we might want to do a gut check. Is this actually a real thing? An easy way to check, but not one that I'd rely on alone for a peer-reviewed paper, is to look at Google Ngrams. So here's reply back, respond back, and rewind back. That's a huge rise in the last generation or so. Now, here's a question. Is it taking over, or are we just saying more things like respond and reply? Well, these aren't looking so good for me. Or are they? The thing is, there's just a lot more opportunities for this kind of thing to happen. So the real question might be, is the slope of reply back steeper than that of reply? That is, are we seeing a greater increase in reply backs than we should expect from all the increase in our talking about replying more generally? Sure looks like it to me. Okay, so this is not a scientific paper, and if it were, we'd want to break out age groups and relationship to internet use and education and dialect and regionality, and even try to get into things like how often does a single person say reply versus reply back over a long span of relevant utterances. Those are the kind of things you'd want to figure out how to operationalize, and I'm not doing all of that. Instead, I'm making a prediction, a falsifiable hypothesis, but one I'll leave it to others or simply to time to fail to disprove. And there's a reason I'm willing to bet on return back and respond back in their ilk becoming dominant. And who knows, in another few generations, maybe even obligatory. And that's because it fits a pattern we see over and over again. In fact, I can't help but do it, and I just did it in saying over and over again. That's the pattern of intensification. It's why we have fixed phrases like a big giant sign or a tiny little mouse. Put simply, one main driver of language change is that words get old. My favorite example of this is what's called Jespersen cycle, named after Otto Jespersen, my third favorite Dane after Niels Bohr and Tycho Brahe. And he, of course, ranks above Viggo Mortensen and Mads Mikkelsen. I assume everybody has an implicit mental ranking of Danes. Tell me where Lars von Trier falls on yours. Anyway, Jespersen cycle refers to this pattern that he noticed, which is one flavor of this thing. It's a grammatical shift from negation that comes before the verb to negation that comes after. If you ever studied French, you were probably taught that the way that you say something like I don't walk is je ne marche pas, where je is I and marche is walk, and both the ne before the verb and the pas after it negate the verb. But you might not know two more interesting facts. First, historically, that pas was just not a thing, at least not a negation. It meant a step, and it still does in other contexts. And French has a bunch of negative words like this that are little things that you didn't even do a little bit of, like mieux from a crumb or goutte from a drop, which can still be used in formal French. And the second thing is, if you ever engaged with contemporary French spoken casually by the French, you might have noticed that now they don't say the ne. Jespersen cycle is that shift from not walk a step to both not and step being obligatory parts of how you negate a verb, any verb, so you can say I don't know with je ne sais pas. And it doesn't mean I don't know a step, all the way to losing the initial negation and pas being now the negation word, je marche pas. English followed a similar pattern with a different name when we went from I know not to I do not know, which is a little more intense and helped along with a light verb, a magical kind of verb that doesn't mean anything. Let me know if you want a video on those, they're everywhere. And now that's reduced to just a grammatical function that sure looks like negation hopping to the other side of the verb. I don't know, or in some dialects, I don't know, where it's just a sad little underspecified puff of air out your nose. I grouped the euphemism treadmill in with this too. That's where you have a word like, say, house of office, itself talking around where you do your business, make content, and it's replaced by a politer form like toilet, which then gets associated with its own contents, and you got to replace it with, say, bathroom. It's just the game of intensity and novelty wearing off. In this case, it's politeness, not intensity, but to me the basic idea is the same. And just for fun, that's basically the same idea behind the new use of literally. It's just another in a long line of intensifiers like really or truly or in fact. We're trying to be interesting when we talk. So why, though, return, respond, reply, rewind, recycle, but not rejoice, refer, reduce, require? I require back that you tell me. Ugh. Well, it turns out there were two re's in the words we got from French and Latin. One literally meant back, as in return. You can pause here if you want to think about the redundant marking of return back and how that looks a lot like the middle stages of Jespersen cycle in French. Not, walk not. But the other developed out of the sense of back into again and anew and ultimately became an intensifier. Rejoicing isn't joicing again, it's just joicing so fucking hard. From jouir in French, which was just like joy but a verb. To do a joyful, if I want to coin a new light verb construction. Similarly, rely is from re and ligare, which came to mean to bind together, having lost the implied bind together again, and it just doesn't really work with the going back idea. One last observation, I see this a lot more with the past tense, although again, there's just a lot more past tense with these words anyway, but it plays into the English pattern of using directional words to signal some aspect of the verb. In this case, it feels very perfective to me, that is, completed action. Like, you can drink something, or you can drink it up. You can reply, but it feels to me like replying back means you didn't just write a reply, you sent it. That's another testable hypothesis, though. There's also probably some restrictions, so like recall back refers to recalling back to a particular time, whereas I don't think I could say recall back to a fact. As we say in academia, more research is needed. But we don't say more research back is needed. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can support it on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Please leave me a comment, they're great for the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, happy learning.